Dotiv, integrative and preventive healthcare. The content discussed in this episode is for informative purposes only
and should not be replaced by individualized professional consultations or professional medical advice.
Hey guys, I'm Tasha.
Hey listeners, this is Goonie, and we're here to discuss lifestyle medicine. Today we want to talk about sexual health, and we want to explore if we are meant to keep monogamous sexual partnerships. Yeah. It's a bit of a sexy topic, but we want to explore that crisis for some of us. We want to make sure that we contextualize this conversation as well. So we're talking about intentional sex. Sexual health is really fundamental to the overall health and well-being of individual, be it couples or families. And again, to contextualize this conversation further, we assume that men and women are able to achieve sexual health and well-being by having respect and consent, that they are able to access comprehensive information about sex and sexuality, that they are aware of the risk and consequences of unprotected sexual activity, and that they are able to access sexual health care. And of course, we'll be talking about different types of relationships where intentional sex can happen in monogamous or in open relationship.
We want to find out, I guess, can this be translated in an experience only in certain types of relationship formats like polyamory or open relationships, or can this actually be experienced in a monogamous relationship? Because we keep seeing this narrative sold in the media, right, about having multiple partners or having one partner, and it's confusing.
So for this conversation, we have the honor to have Seema Anand, author, storyteller, mythologist, focusing on women's narrative with a special expertise on the erotic literature narratives of ancient India.
So welcome, Seema, to Dotiv the podcast.
Thank you, Tasha. Thank you, Gune. It's great to be here with you.
I guess maybe we can start with, for this conversation, to give them context, what we mean by monogamous relationships.
Really, what does monogamy mean? Because I think culturally, personally, individually, monogamy just means different things to different people. So for some people, when I talk to people in certain parts of the world, for them, monogamy is about being, about only having penetrative sex with one person. Mm-hmm. For some other people, even the idea of fantasizing about somebody else is tantamount to cheating. Right. So I don't think that there is a description that we can give or a definition that we can use for monogamy. I think it's just too general a term. Mm-hmm. And I personally think that it's one of those really difficult things to ever actually focus on. Because again, even if you take one description, let's say that I say that if I kiss somebody, mm-hmm. aside from my partner, mm-hmm. on the mouth, right. that makes it, that means I've stepped out of my relationship. Okay, let's take that as a definition, just for the sake of theory. Now, there are people there who will say, well, there are cultures where that is so normal. It's, just giving somebody a kiss on the mouth, a peck on the lips, a peck on the cheeks is so normal. For somebody else, that would be totally out of their thought process. I just think monogamy is a really difficult thing to talk about. However, having said that, let's actually get down to what we're trying to discuss, and that is whether or not women can or should step out of their relationship to pursue a slightly different emotional or sexual attraction.
Is it possible and is it healthy for women to be in monogamous sexual partnerships only, or is it okay for us to be in a non-monogamous sexual partnership?
Yeah. Okay, so let's say that at every stage of our lives, every human being is going to be attracted to somebody else. Yeah. Goes without saying. Mm-hmm. Okay, you cannot spend your entire life only being attracted to one person. You can be sitting right next to that person. You could be totally in love with your partner, but you could find somebody else really sexually exciting for a short while, for a longer while, whatever. You are expected to go into a relationship for life. It's supposed to be the center of your universe. Nobody ever teaches you anything about relationships. Nobody says, this is how you do a relationship. This is what you have to do to make sure that it stays alive and happy and fresh and healthy. We're never taught those things because it's never considered necessary. You just have to flow along and fit into a box. as time goes on in your own relationship, in long-term relationships, I think also most relationships reach a plateau.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of us get to a point in a relationship. And I found this with there was one point, I'm now 60, but there was a point in my late 40s, early 50s, when I found 80% of the women I knew, there was something else going on in their head. Either they were actually experimenting, or they were wanting to experiment, or they were talking about wanting to do something different. Relationships reach a plateau.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, women have suddenly come into their own. When we're younger, we're under so many restrictions. We're told, oh, you have to behave like this, and you can't think like this, and you can't do this, and you have children that you have to bring up. You get to a certain age, and suddenly you become an individual. You become autonomous. You understand what you like, what you don't like, what turns you on, what you'd like to see in your life.
Very interesting you say that, because we don't hear about women having affairs publicly so often as much as we do about men having affairs.
Maybe they're just better at
they have to
hiding
be
it.
having they have to have it with somebody, right? The guys have to have their affairs. There are
Exactly.
That's true.
An affair doesn't necessarily mean, like I said, penetrative sex. It could be phone calls. It could be late night text messages. It could be just that little flutter of the heart, knowing that, okay, you're going to meet that person at a party. There's going to be a little bit of frisson, that little conversation. All of those things they make, like I said, it's all cultural. In some parts of the world, that is what constitutes a relationship outside of your own relationship. And in other parts of the world, that's not such a big deal. So I think that we have to start by saying that every single human being is going to find somebody else attractive at some point. It's just what you decide to do with it.
I think that it goes back to the female's ability or right to have sexual pleasure. And that it has been, thankfully for our generation and hopefully generations to come, has been opened up, and we have more access to this. But Seema, in your point of view, how is that playing a role in us even exploring these non-monogamous relationships?
So, okay, people of my generation, generally, I'm generalizing. I'm not taking specific examples. Generally, we married quite early. So by the time you were 22, 23, 24, 25, you were married. And generally, there were fewer girls who had experimented with anybody else. So you might have had one or two boyfriends, others might not have had any boyfriends, but generally you went from your parents' home to your husband's home. It was generally an arranged marriage, and that's how life happened. Okay. There was no discussion about sexual pleasure. That wasn't something that was taught to girls. You weren't told that when you are with your husband, you were told that, yes, you knew that there was going to be sex. Even me, I come from a really unusual background of very, very forward-thinking women who lived very unusual lives. My mother, my grandmother, my grandmother's mother, my grandmother's sisters, everybody in my family, nobody's ever lived a traditional life. They've all been highly educated. They've all been working women. They've all chosen their own partners. So in spite of that, I didn't have what we call a sex ed. My mother told me about the birds and the bees, but nobody actually sat me down and said, this is how sex takes place. You will feel this kind of pleasure. You should feel this kind of pleasure. If you are not feeling this kind of pleasure, explore certain techniques, because that's what sex should be about. You should feel this. Nobody said to me that, this is what you should be expecting from your partner. This much understanding, this much love, this much attention. Or, there were no boundaries. There were no definitions given to us about what makes pleasurable relationships, what makes abusive relationships, what makes a relationship not worth having. Do you know what I mean? Were we ever taught any of this? Never. So you go into a relationship and you gradually find out what sexuality means to you. Sometimes through a whole burden of myths and untruths and misinformation because that's what you've been told by somebody else. And especially when you're younger, my God, nobody has any idea. You're reading books. In my day, of course, there wasn't even porn videos, right? So you had some porn
We had
magazines.
CDs, or like the tapes.
No, sorry, sweetheart. We are before that. Okay?
You had VHS tapes.
Before VHS tapes. So India did not have VHS tapes till after I was married. So this is
Really? Wow.
before
Okay.
VHS. Yeah, there was a time, darling, when these things did not exist. We grew up without it. What we had was magazines, and mostly German porn magazines. It was really weird. They were German. And I don't know why. But there was magazines that you looked at, which, as we know with porn, there is nothing real. You have no idea. Even the body that they're showing in a German magazine is not your body. You cannot really relate to it.
Yeah, correct.
So
yeah.
There was very little.
Right.
And yes, there were a few people who had video recorders, and you could go to somebody's house to watch a porn film, but it was like limited.
Yeah.
Our knowledge of it was extraordinarily limited. I mean, I remember my bit of excitement used to come from The Godfather. I don't know if anybody's ever read or watched The Godfather.
Yeah.
But there are 3 pages in there. Every girl, every boy of my generation had that book, and those 3 pages were read every day for your self-pleasure. It isn't even that exciting. I mean, honestly, you read it now, you're like, what? Huh? Did I really get turned on to this? But that's what I'm trying to say is that our knowledge was limited because it was kept from us. Okay,
Right,
it was like we were deliberately not taught anything, and resultantly, when you go into this, you go in with so much misinformation that truly you don't understand what any of it means. I was a virgin when I got married, and I remember saying to my husband constantly, who's like almost 11 years older than me, well, guess what? You're so lucky because I'm a virgin. And he'd be like, so? I mean, like, why do you feel that this is such a big deal? I was made to believe it was a big deal.
Yeah.
Hence,
Right.
it was. But I say this now. I mean, I had a lot of friends who were guys in college. They're really good friends. There was nothing else between us, but they were just literally friends. But after I got married, suddenly society started to tell me that was not cool. I could not have friends who were guys.
Yeah.
And so, these are things that are put into your head. That's why I'm saying that it is so hard to define monogamy and to say what your limits should be, because we're talking about different generations of people. But anyway, forget my generation, because that's sort of we're all at a different point now. Let's talk about today. I think that so when we were younger, we were told you get married because that's for your stability. I find Gen Z doesn't think like that, because a lot of Gen Z kids have grown up with divorced parents. And they've grown up understanding that you don't go and seek a marriage to become stable, because no, my parents' marriage wasn't stable. So most Gen Z kids will say, okay, I need to become stable before I choose a relationship.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
before I get into a committed relationship.
Definitely. A lot of us think like that. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. And also, because you're not going into a committed relationship to begin with, it's not as if you don't have your hormones or your desires. You are going to now find different partners. You're going to have short-term maybe relationships or whatever with different partners. You're also going to have this idea of friends with benefits, because yes, it's a good idea to have sex. It's a natural desire, but you don't want to go out and find somebody out there in the public who you don't know. For your own safety, you're going to find somebody that you know. So you have friends with benefits. And all of this is, it's sort of, I think it's just sort of what younger people have found works for their new thinking.
Right.
And I know that in some cultures, the girl, when she goes out and does it, is still considered the loose person.
Right.
The guy, equally, there's enough pressure on the man to say, well, why the hell aren't you doing it? It's not because guys are like, yeah, you're so cool. It is literally, I get guys writing into me and saying, I don't want to be out there sleeping with every woman. What is wrong with me? My friends tell me I'm like not normal.
Right.
It's the same narrative that's being fed.
Right.
So the world has moved on. Just the very fact that women and men have said that we will have friends with benefits means that even over there, there is a certain level of saying, I don't want to just go randomly out for both men and women and say, I just don't want to be randomly sleeping with everybody. I think that this is one of those myths that has been perpetuated by people go out. And a lot of men, unfortunately, think that because this is what they've been taught. And they think that they would like to go out there and constantly be banging a new woman every day. I get people like that writing to me all the time on social media saying, oh, yeah, I go to sex workers every day. I could go 30 days a month to a different sex worker. There will always be people who think it's about what they term the body count. All right.
Yeah.
Most thinking people don't think like that. But we go right back to this idea of monogamy. Do you say that when you are in a committed relationship, you can never find somebody else sexy? In your mind, when you are having sex with the same person, can you never fantasize about somebody else? I've even had people say, like, if you're fantasizing about a film star, it's okay. But if you're fantasizing about a real person, it's cheating.
Right. Yeah.
Sex and sexuality and intimacy all happens in the brain, in the mind. And you could be totally faithful physically, but you could be totally out of that relationship mentally and emotionally. So I just don't think that there is a black and white that we can have for this. Today, the way that things have changed, every individual, I mean, I know that there are some people in certain parts of the world who are still in very conservative backgrounds and they can't access other partners, but most people today have the capacity, the right, and the ability to be with as many partners as they want. We are told that human beings were not meant to be monogamous. We are being told that. So I no longer have a choice. So hence, when I think, which is a very normal thing, ooh, I like that guy. He's cute.
Yeah.
I'm automatically thinking, oh yeah, that's because human beings are not meant to be monogamous. I like him. That means I should be doing something with him because monogamy is abnormal. And when we talk about monogamy, then that is, oh, that's a societal construct that's being put upon us.
If we put the context you were saying, so remove marriage out of the way, say you actually in an open relationship, and then as you said, you see somebody and you feel very attracted to that person. And then that next step, which comes to what are you going to do about it? And say you actually entertain the idea of having sex with that person. Well, what is the risk that you're taking as you enter that physical space with someone else when you are open with someone else as well?
I think there are just so many risks on there. I mean, when you start to forget all the other more basic stuff, it's the emotional risk that you take for yourself. You know, yesterday we were talking about sex dolls, very, very expensive sex dolls that are being created in America, where they're robotic sex dolls. So they're like literally fed to be almost like human beings. And they're very expensive and they're customized. And they can be as much as $50,000 for a sex doll. And there's a lot of guys who buy these sex dolls. There are very few male sex dolls, which a woman would buy. These sex dolls, because they're so expensive, a lot of guys actually get into a relationship. They're sex dolls. So there are people in the States who are married to their sex dolls. This is their official wife. And they're very happy with it because they're like, oh, we're socially awkward. We can't go out there and be with other people. This is the only sexual relationship that they will ever know. So they will come there. This doll is programmed to be and respond and behave exactly as they want. And they will have sex with this doll and look after it. And it's all fine. Women find it harder to have a relationship with a male doll. They could probably have sex with it as a sex toy, but because women need something more in the way of an emotional connection.
Right.
Again, this is all generalization. It's the narrative we've been fed. I do believe that women, when they step out of a relationship, there is always the risk of an emotional involvement with the other person. All right.
Yeah. There's a tendency for women to get emotionally vested and hurt
also, I think because we're more open to our emotions as women, we've been taught from the beginning that, yeah, women are emotional, hence we can access our emotions. A lot of guys are not even allowed to access their emotions. They feel it's so unmanly. Like, how can you? So a lot of threesomes that happen are actually one guy and two women. And I've had women write to me and say, my husband and I want to look for a threesome, but he's insisting it should be another woman. And I'm saying, I would like to try another man. And there are very few men who are capable of having another man in the threesome, because men more than women have been taught to really, really be homophobic.
Right.
I mean, even the idea of some guy touching you is like, it sets
true.
off this thing in them, which is
panic or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas women are a lot more, physical with each other. So we don't have those issues. So I just think that there is a real danger of stepping out. When you are with somebody else, there is always the risk of emotionally getting attached to somebody else. But it's not just women. Emotionally, this impacting and breaking up your relationship and so on. But I don't know whether that is what really monogamy or polygamy comes down to. I just think it's one of those really wide subjects that we can't. I think one of the best answers I've ever had is it's a choice. It's a choice, like I've said. I know that we'd all love to have a definition, but I'm sorry, I don't think that there is a way of defining emotions, particularly around monogamy.
Like categorizing them. There's no box or like little bucket to fill them in, right?
There's one other thing I'd like to say, is that as a woman, if you suddenly find that you got an attraction towards somebody else, or you feel this way, I don't think that it is always necessary to go and tell your partner that you feel like this. There's this whole thing about being open and truthful. I think that's fantastic, but not everything has to be discussed. Just like when you go to the toilet, you don't come and tell your partner exactly what kind of poo you did. I mean, you don't describe it in detail. They know you've been,
some
right?
People do.
What I'm saying, some people do. I think some mystery is good. There also has to be an understanding that as you go forward, unfortunately, there are some things that will always stay in the mind. And if you're not going to do anything about it, or whatever is happening, don't go and necessarily be this person who says, well, I'm going to tell you that actually I found that person very attractive and I was it will cause more issues. Why?
Maybe they have guilt, right? Like
distress, I guess, no?
But going back to our question earlier about like women having intentional sex, and can we have intentional sex outside of a monogamous context, right? And like one of the reasons this whole conversation was sparked is because I'm finding it hard. Like I'm currently in a space where I'm single and I'm available, I would say, but also, yes, I have desires. So I want to be able to act on those desires. But I find that it's really hard to express my intention to have a conscious sexual experience without having that attachment to like, I want to be in a relationship. But how do we create this like level of intimacy without being, I guess, attached or in a relationship with men? Like
it is that narrative. So it's this change that's happening. Imagine now that we've moved very, very suddenly from where we were, that, if you are going into a woman having sex outside of her marriage is one of two things. She's a slut and she's sleeping with somebody, or she's having an affair with somebody. So there weren't any other options. Today, we've changed to this space where, the young girls who are now independent, they're seeking to find themselves, they're trying to understand how they feel. And like you said, having a mindful, happy, intimate relationship without being in a relationship. My friend who's the head of department of feminism says that when she teaches feminism, her class only has women in it. For some reason, the guys don't come. Right. So this new change that is happening, the women are learning it. The guys still aren't. It's going to take time. It's going to take time for this narrative to filter down, because The women are saying, we want to absorb this new information. The guys are going to be dragged into it. Not all, but a lot of them are going to be dragged into it, kicking and screaming, because they just don't understand what the hell is going on. Okay.
Right.
And it works both ways. So this guy wrote to me the other day. He said that eventually he wants to freeze his sperm. And he said eventually he would like to maybe consider having a child, maybe just with another surrogate, or, just eventually he wants to have a child. However, he doesn't want to either get into a relationship, or he doesn't want to blah, 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 whatever. But he wants to freeze his sperm. And he said, I decided to be very open with the girls that I was dating. And he said, every time I mention that I want to freeze my sperm, the girls back off, get really freaked out, and don't want to see him anymore. And he was like, should I be worried? Should I not be telling them this?
Right.
So we were trying to work out, like, does that make the girls think he's not into wanting a relationship? Does it make them think, oh my God, he's freezing his sperm, he's clearly thinking weirdly and longer about it? I think we're all in that space where that turn is happening.
Right.
And everybody's distrustful of everybody else.
That's a really strong word, actually. The word distrustful. It's true. Like, I'm always skeptical about what the other person is, like, thinking or doing. And even in like casual sex, like, even if there's a condom, I'm just like skeptical about the guy a bit. I'm just like, is he trying to plant a seed?
And the funny thing is that we tell the guys that, look, you're going on a date, carry a condom because it's good to be safe. Yeah. But then you see that condom and you're like, excuse me, like, what do you think you are getting at? You know what I mean? It's just, I think everybody is just going through that change, and everybody is distrustful at the moment and truly we are on different planets right now because the woman's narrative is changing. And that means that the balance is changing. I mean, something that's been carried on for centuries is changing. Just think how difficult it is for the other part of the species to understand or accept it. It's so not easy. Do you know how many women write to me and say that they have been in a relationship before, and now they're with their partner who they're getting married to or whatever, and how angrily the partner is reacting that I'm not your first.
Right.
So girls are finding their agency.
Right.
I would like to go into the concept of lust and intimacy and distrust. I feel that that's a big component that refrain us from getting intimate, pleasurable, consensual sex. Because I feel that lust makes me think in a very stupid way. You think from a moment where you're sane and you're like, okay, this person, this man is very attractive. But I know, because I know of his personality and I know of his background, like, this is not going to be a long-term relationship, but it could be a fun experience. And I'm single, he's single, so let's just explore this. We go into this, and then because it's great, there was this level of intimacy where we both kind of let loose, and that we reach a certain point where we really maybe reach something that we couldn't do, like, in a verbal setting. And now suddenly I think I can potentially go into a relationship with this person when I started having feelings and I started trying to, like, move mountains for this thing to work. And I feel I'm thinking out of lust, but I'm not sure if this is the right word or if I'm thinking with emotions. And so I'd like to get your thoughts on that component of lust that I think not a lot of us can, like, understand, and how it can impair our judgment.
Okay, so let's start with the first thing. Unfortunately, this is one of those words that were introduced to us in the 7 deadly sins. So it's a Christian word, lust. And I think that it comes with so much baggage, the word. I think that it's a word that we need to get rid of, just because it comes with so many connotations of bad. If you say, I have desire, I have supreme desire, I am so turned on, somehow it feels okay. The moment you use the word lust, it just just changes the space that you're in. So at any point, the excitement, the pleasure, the desire is what we feel. Let's rephrase that and say, that we feel a terrible amount of excitement or desire. I'm very aroused when I see this person. When I'm thinking logically, I know that he's terrible for me and I don't want them in my life. But at that point, I'm like, yeah, I want this. And then the sex is really good. And you're like, yeah, I want this again. Yesterday, again, there's somebody actually said something really interesting, young Egyptian woman, who said that when she was exploring her sexuality and that she was at this space. So she's come out of her space. She was in that space where in certain cultures, you're taught to believe that you're the dutiful wife and you will give your all to be with this person. And then you stop because things go wrong. And then you transition. Transitions take time. They don't quite get there because nobody's taught us how to transition. We're doing it on our own. So she said, I met this guy. We had sex. It was fantastic. And then because I was in this space of thinking, this guy is not right for me, I don't actually want him, before I can get attached, I'm going to get out of that. So she said, if I'm enjoying something, learn to care, own my emotion for that time, because if I own it and acknowledge it and accept it, I can deal with it better. So it is less likely that I would, and even if you go through that point, because, I'm really into that point of intimacy with you, like you said, you reached it without the words. I think it's quite nice to be able to enjoy it for that. But I did think that this was such an important point that she made, because right now the culture has also become about who could care less. It's almost a competition. Yeah, I'm in this, but actually I don't really care. No,
So
I'm
true.
in it, and actually I care less. Yeah.
Yeah. Hit the
I
nail on the
agree,
head.
It's a lot. It's quite present in our generation, and I think it's sad because then after it means that you're actually not communicating what you really feel and what you really want. And when you are vulnerable and you're open with regards to what you want, then it's misunderstood.
That transition that's taking place, and just like we weren't taught about sex earlier, nobody's teaching us about transitioning into this new avatar.
That's so true. And so what is your take with regards to that bit where, when you actually enjoy that moment? So you said, okay, enjoy it for what it is. That's something that that pushes us to entertain more than what it is. What is that? Is it greed? What is that?
It's very natural, don't you think? I mean, if you have, I'm a chocolate addict. Okay, dark, good, rich, dark chocolate. Oh, Now the thing is, I have high cholesterol, and I know I shouldn't be having it, but I will order it, and I'll say, okay, I'll take one bite, but then I love it, and I know it's not good for me, but I will take another bite, and then I will take another bite, and gradually I will say, you know what, Seema, this thing has gone up, cholesterol has gone up. Now they're going to put you on statins. What is going on with you? And then I will learn to back off slowly. It's a learning process. We can't do this overnight. We are transitioning. Stories take generations to settle in. And when you have enjoyed something, and if you are capable of understanding that you've enjoyed it for what it is, everything has a time span. You will want to do it again and give in to you start off in the first place having sex with somebody because you think you're going to enjoy it. And then you do enjoy it, but then you don't want anybody to know that you enjoyed it because so you're negating your own experience.
But a lot of what you're saying sounds also like we need to be building our self-awareness and building ourselves, like understanding ourselves in a deeper way, so that when we do choose to go through these experiences, we have a more intentional and meaningful experience, and we don't, like, as you said, negate ourselves or negate our experiences, right? So what would you recommend to people to invest more in themselves before they go and invest in intimate or sexual experiences?
Definitely, but I think that's what Gen Z is doing now, isn't it? Like I said, you guys are a generation of young people who are really trying to understand themselves. There's less stigma attached to certain things that you can do. You know what I mean? The world is bigger. I also want to say that let's say that you're in a situation where you can't actually go and have another another moment with that same person. Maybe that other person walked off and is no longer available for you to repeat the experience. I'll tell you something. In people of an older generation, a lot of people will say that they have used those times for their fantasies for a long time afterwards. Enjoy it. Just because the person walked away, if it was pleasurable, keep it as your storehouse of sexual pleasure, because it's really, really important. Not everybody's lucky enough to, I have a storehouse of certain people that I fantasize about, of things that have happened. And then every now and then you go somewhere and somebody behaves really badly and suddenly they fall off your thing because you're like, this idiot, like, I had a thing about this idiot, like, seriously, are you mad? And I feel really angry when I lose that person from my my pleasure trove, because I'm like, okay, I have one less person to fantasize about when I am pleasuring. It's treasure your pleasure troves.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind.
You're
There's a
building up
modern term
your-
for it, like I heard this in a TV show. It's called the spank bank.
The spank bank.
Yeah.
Okay.
Spank bank.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It's like building up your registry of of sexual encounters. How do you deal with jealousy in a monogamous relationship in general? Is jealousy healthy? Is jealousy something that we should entertain? Is this something good, or actually a reflection of ego?
There is always some kind of jealousy that comes up, but in monogamy, we never deal with the idea of jealousy because it's not built into the structure. It's like, no, you're monogamous. You're not supposed to be jealous. You're not supposed to be stepping out. Hence, there can be no jealousy. We never deal with the issues that come with it. So we need to redefine monogamy to understand what all it can bring. Whereas if you talk about polyamory, the structures of polyamory are built around how to deal with jealousy. They will teach you. You can go to therapists for that. In a monogamous relationship, it's like, jealous? Don't be so stupid.
Right.
Jealousy is the most common and the most natural human emotion, and it will crop up whether you want it or not.
Right.
You can be the most settled, grounded person in the world. It will crop up without you realizing it has cropped up, and you can't do anything about it. The only kind of control you have, you cannot get rid of it. The only thing that you can do is learn to understand it and control it. Like, literally, it is the most natural thing. It can be anything from whether it's ego to the most simple things that are just natural inside you. I think that we have a very toxic relationship with the word jealousy, because in every other aspect of our lives, we're told jealousy, it's a very bad thing. You mustn't feel jealousy. Nobody ever says, let's teach you how to get over it. It's like, you're not supposed to feel it. You're a bad person. But
So true.
In a relationship, like if you watch Bollywood, or like I was saying, Mills and Boone, or any of this thing, a guy being jealous in a relationship always makes him a hero.
Yeah.
You watch the Bollywood films, the more jealous, the more toxic, the more violent he is. He's going and beating up other guys. He's having tantrums. He's fighting with his girlfriend. It makes him a hero. If the woman displays jealousy, she is stupid, she's unreasonable, she's breaking up the relationship. So we have never addressed jealousy when it comes to relationships, and jealousy exists. And you're going to feel it whether you like it or not. And the thing that I always say to people is that when you feel jealous, journal. Write down what you're feeling that day and what happened that made you think like that. Because sometimes you are literally thinking beyond what is necessary. So write it down. And more importantly, I'm going to say something that may not go down very well, but how you deal with your jealousy is going to be up to you. That's going to be your responsibility. Right. Your partner's job is to help you. Your partner's job is to be there and be supportive for you, but they cannot get rid of your jealousy, because no matter what they say, it's not going to take care of it. You have to figure out what you're feeling and you have to deal with it. Okay, that's really, really important. And finally, I think one of the things that we talk about in dealing with jealousy is a lot of times you react. You have a jealous attack, you will react, you'll scream, you'll shout, you throw things, or you'll get nasty, or whatever it is, whichever way you're doing it. The thing to do is to understand what part of your body that jealousy is manifesting in. Like when you're having a jealous attack, actually at that point, try and figure out where you're feeling it. Are you feeling it here? Is your heart beating faster? Are you feeling it in your stomach? Are you getting a tummy ache? Because it always manifests in some part of your body. Right. And then that's the outer form of dealing with it. Because if you can figure out which part of your body it's manifesting in, you actually learn to deal with it better, because the next time that comes up, so if it's a stomach ache, you'll know that, okay, I'm going to lie myself down flat. I'm going to put a hot water bottle on my stomach. I'm going to calm my stomach down. Mm. And it's funny, but it actually mitigates that very heavy emotion.
Right.
So it does help a little bit. But I would say, I'd say journal, write down what you're feeling and how you're reacting. Write it down.
Because, that helps you take perspective on the gravity of the incident that triggered that jealousy. And then it doesn't mean that you were not righteous to feel that, but it's more about the intensity, right? Like leveling that and understanding that level of jealousy, and if it's justified. Because I do sometimes it is also your partner's responsibility to take accountability for the actions that has triggered it, but you have to be able to communicate it back in a concise way to say, like, this is what triggered me.
Because even if they take accountability for it, you still have to deal with it. It's
with that emotion inside, right?
Yeah,
100%. Love it. And to nourish what you currently have with, say, your current sexual partners, what would you say are kind of best practice or things that you could include in the way you want to nourish and make that relationship evolve to something that is maybe potentially more fulfilling?
So one of the things I always say to people is that do things separately. Go out with friends, with colleagues, with other people, and do exciting things. Not just do straightforward things that get really exciting, because when you come back, you need to have more stories to share with each other. According to the Kamasutra, when you sit down together for an evening of intimacy, you begin with telling each other either naughty or gossipy stories to change the atmosphere around. You have to bring your mind in from that space of stress and work and you have to bring it to yourselves where you can. The second thing is learn to laugh with each other, because if you can laugh with each other, there's a hell of a lot of there's a lot that can be solved. There is far less tension in a relationship where you can giggle together. And it's funny, I think the very first book they say about intimacy was written by Lord Shiva. So it is dictated by Lord Shiva, and it is written by Nandi, his bull. He takes it down in dictation. And this is where they say Brahma has created the men, and then he can't create the woman. And then after a lot of difficulty, manages to create the women. And then he says to his mind-born children, the men and the women, he says, now go and multiply. But they have no idea what to do. And so they go to Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva is like, okay, I will write your book, but that's going to take time. But the first thing is go tickle each other, he says. Go tickle each other, because when you laugh together, everything else will follow. So laughter is really, really important. And finally, think of relationships, think of intimacy, think of sex as an art form. If you want to keep something fresh and going, you have to think about it. You cannot do the same thing every day and think that it's going to be fantastic. It is going to become dull and dusty and dead and boring and monotonous. And it won't mean anything by the end of it. To treat it, if you want to have it for all of your life, particularly with the same partner, again, the Kamasutra says that different women with different physiologically and emotional aspects have their space of arousal in different settings. So certain types of women will be more aroused by the seaside. Some will find the mountains more arousing, and so on. I always say, you know what? When you're with a long-term partner, go try different geographies just for the fun of it.
Yeah.
And remember, sex and intimacy is a lot more than just penetration. There's a lot more you can do.
If we look at our heritage as South Asians, I just want to know, with regards to the Kamasutra, and how is that? What does it say about monogamy and polygamy? Was these concepts already discussed?
So, okay, let's put it this way. The Kamasutra, which most people don't understand or don't realize, was written for men. So this is written in 300 and something AD. Women have not yet been taught how to read and write on a regular basis. Right. So books that were written to teach men. The Kamasutra was written to teach men how to live their perfect life. It's written in 7 sections. So the first section tells and it's written for young men of leisure and of wealth. So men of a certain class. So the first section is about how to build your house, how to decorate your house, how many bedrooms you should have, how many beds should be in each room, because they actually believe that the bed that you have sex in, you shouldn't sleep in the same bed. So you had a separate bed for sex and you have a separate bed for sleeping. It said how many perfume bottles you should have behind your bed, because because let's face it, there is no room for bad smells in the world of seduction. So if you're and agreed. It says that if your partner passes wind, then you should have some kind of perfume to sort of
thoughtful.
Gotta be prepared. You have to be prepared.
You have to be prepared. It tells the men how many hours they should spend being massaged and having their bath, how many hours they should spend talking to their minor birds, etc. So that's the first section. The second section is about the arts of pleasure, and it is literally just that one section. Then it moves on to how to look for a wife, how to look for the perfect wife, etc. So it has an interesting point. When it first gets written, they're talking about pleasure, but they're talking about courtesans. So they're talking about a man and his partner, who would be his courtesan, lover, or whoever, somebody from the court. Later translations, later commentaries on the Kamasutra, let's say 1,000 years later, by the time you get to the 1400s or 1500s, the morality has changed a little bit in society. And so now they're talking about husband and wife. So they're talking about the arts of pleasure and the positions and the kissing and so on, but as married partners. Okay, so it first starts off not discussing this with a married partner, but discussing it as an individual man and an individual woman. So what I find interesting is it says what a woman finds pleasurable when it is done to her, what a man finds pleasurable when it is done to him, as opposed to the man should do this to the woman. There's a couple of Sanskrit words that are used quite regularly, but the way that the words are put together, you can almost you decode them in different ways. It doesn't necessarily mean a relationship between two married people. It doesn't mean also between two committed people who are living together. It's a relationship that they're talking about. It says that once you find a lover, you should not give them up very quickly or very easily. Good lovers are hard to find, and the best kind of sex is when you find comfort in your sexual act. So a lot of people today think that good sex is about, we jumped into bed and it was wild. That is not what the Kamasutra describes as good sex, because that's not sustainable. Because you cannot get that forever with the same person. So it says that the best sex is where you're not having to watch the time and thinking, oh my God, I've come to see this person just for a little while, I better get out. The best sex is not where you're having to look over your shoulder and think, shit, I wonder who saw me coming over here to be with this person. The best sex is where you can be comfortable together and slowly start off and feel each bit of your arousal, or go through each part of it separately and feel it. So it's literally about taking yourself up a little bit at a time, slowing down. And today you might find that the way that you're being kissed on the neck is absolutely fabulous. tomorrow you might find that the way that you're being kissed on the arm, or just lying there and thinking of something else while somebody penetrates you and just be chilled out, is really, really pleasurable. And so it says that, orgasms, pleasure, desire is different every single day. And it definitely suggests that monogamy is a better thing. But it also says to the men that you have to learn how to pleasure your partner fully. The Kamasutra, like I said, was written in 300 something AD. If you take an 11th century translation, which was written by a Buddhist monk called Padma Shri, in that, when he redoes the introduction, he changes it for wife. So he says, if you can make sure that your wife is fully pleasured, because it says that initially men also have gone through centuries of being the ones who get the pleasure. Why should they suddenly start pleasuring the woman fully? And so they're told, well, if you pleasure your woman fully, your business will do better. And I love that idea. If you can make sure that your woman is fully pleasured, you'll become a better warrior, because they're transferable skills. So they were really trying very hard. And every single king, whoever came to the throne of their little kingdom, would have a copy or version of the Kamasutra written up, because they believed that for a long-term relationship to be good, really good, you needed good, mutually pleasurable intimacy. Okay, that would make that relationship stable. If the relationship was stable, then society would become stable. Because if every relationship is stable, society becomes stable. And if society becomes stable, and if society becomes stable, the kingdom will be stable.
Okay, I see the link now a lot more clearly.
So the idea was to say, they were not suggesting that you go out and have random sex with other people. It says that you have to build up how you have pleasure with the same partner. So this was being taught to men.
Love it. And for the Kama Sutra, alluding to the fact that it's better to be monogamous, and because it leads to all the different steps ultimately leads to a more stable economy, society. But kind of to close off the conversation about exploring, are we meant to be monogamous?
I think it's about choice, Guni. I think that it is a choice, and you are an autonomous person. If you feel that you're going to do something else, remember that, one, it is going to impact you. Secondly, if you are in a committed relationship, remember that there were certain rules to that relationship. Did your partner sign up for you stepping out to this extent? Does your partner deserve to have that? You know what I mean? Like, it's about responsibility. If we're going to take responsibility for the fact, or if we're going to take the privilege of saying that we are independent people who have the right to make our choices, you also have to say that it comes with responsibility to yourself as well as to your committed partner. So I think these things need to be thought through a little bit more.
To close off, we want to ask you rapid fire questions.
So our first question is, can you name a pivotal moment which shaped your understanding of what sexual health means to you?
It was the day that I suddenly realized that the way that I experienced pleasure was normal. Because as a woman, you've been taught that pleasure is how a man feels it. When they ejaculate, that's pleasure. When they get suddenly excited, that's pleasure. When they get a sudden erection, that's pleasure. As a woman, you don't feel pleasure in the same way. It doesn't manifest the same way in your body. So I grew up thinking I was abnormal. I went through a lot of my years of my marriage thinking I was abnormal. The day that I realized that my pleasure, the way I experience it, was absolutely normal, was the pivotal moment in my life. Suddenly, I felt like, I'm okay.
Love it.
Right.
Love.
And what's one thing you would like to detach from?
I'd like to detach from that feeling of, so when you're in a relationship with somebody, with anybody, you have there's a certain dependence, there's a certain attachment. And as a woman, as women, we have been taught to absorb the thing, so if the other person is angry, you absorb that. You've been taught that somehow you have to deal with that.
Yeah.
I want to be able to detach myself from that. I don't want to absorb, because I find that when other people in any relationship, when the other person is feeling negative or angry, they will automatically say something so that they can transfer their negativity to you. They feel okay. And then you're carrying the burden of it. I want to be able to detach from that. I got to that point some years ago, but I'm back in that point of vulnerability again.
That's a really powerful one.
It's a process, right? It's a constant work.
Yeah.
It's a constant work.
And a third one is there a lesson around sexual health that you keep having to relearn?
Yes, that actually pleasure comes in so many different ways, and that it's actually good for you. Don't feel guilty about it, is what I was trying to say. Even if you're in a committed relationship with somebody, it doesn't mean that the only way that you will experience pleasure is when you are in bed with that person, etc. There will be times when you self-pleasure. And we're always being made to feel guilty about that. And I'm always having to, because I carry that in my head as well. Each time I'm guilted. So yeah, it's so interesting.
Important. We would never think coming from you that you would feel that you would go there mentally.
It's thousands of years of narrative that's passed down to us.
Exactly, isn't it? Hopefully,
so the guilt of for feeling pleasure, the guilt for saying it's okay to have self-pleasure. Yeah.
Wow. Then this is our last question to you. Which of these tools help you the most on a challenging day? Meditation / prayer, sleep, exercise, quality time, or other?
Oh, okay. So I think it's different things on different days. Sleep is always good. And talking to a good friend about things that, just random things. Shopping.
Oh my goodness, that was the same thing for me. But it's not good for the bank account. It's really not that great.
But fortunately over here you can take things back, right?
She winked, by the way, for those listening in audio.
Loved it. All right. I think that leaves us with some guidance, and also some agency, as you said. Like, it's our choice if we do want to go into open relationships, if we do want to explore these things, but it needs to be done with respect and of course communicated to the other person in a format that works for both of you. And for me, my key takeaway is there's no black or white definition of what monogamy means. And that's why it's good to talk about it with your partner, and by talking about it, it brings you closer, and it maybe potentially reduce these frictions and misunderstandings. So thank you, Seema, for this.
Yeah. I think I started this conversation slightly conflicted. Like, I've always had this conversation in my head about monogamy versus polyamory or polygamy or open relationships. And there's always this side of me that's like, monogamy is just easier to follow because it's a structure that's already laid out. Just figure it out. But with this conversation, I feel more liberated with that understanding, that I can create the meaning of monogamy to my understanding and my potential partner's understanding as well, to have that open dynamic. So I really appreciate having that openness in that conversation. So thank you for that, Seema.
Not at all, Tasha. Such a pleasure. Thank you, Guni, for having me. Tasha, thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and select that follow or subscribe button.
Till then, stay well.